Last year, I think maybe during Wimbledon, there was a press conference where Novak Djokovic, the best tennis player in the world, many, many, many times over champion, the one with the most Grand Slams, etc., was asked a question, and it went like this. It went, what's it like to be something of the bad guy, even put that emphasis on it, chasing after Rafa and Roger, obviously Nadal and Federer, all these years? Now, what's bizarre is if you're a native English speaker, especially if you are English and understand the context behind that statement in American or British English, it's actually a fairly tame question. It's basically actually being somewhat respectful, putting out the set of terms of how their relationship would be characterised in terms of chasing each other. But what's bizarre is so many Djokovic fans, and even just general people, I notice a lot of people who are not native English speakers, got really offended by this and suggested, like, he's saying he's a bad guy, and like it was some sort of like crazy judgment of Djokovic. This is just the usual media bias against him. And what's so bizarre about it is this. It's a complete misunderstanding of what the context was. Like, notice that when the guy said that, he didn't mean, what's it like to be a bad guy? That's not what the statement was at all. This emphasis, especially, what's it like to be something of a bad guy, like air quotes, chasing after Rafa and Roger all these years. The implication there, by the way, is that since Rafa, Nadal and Federer, especially Federer, were absurd media darlings and enormous fan favourites. If you don't know, by the way, even though Nadal had won and has won a bazillion of those French Opens, because it's France and they speak French and they have a natural bias towards people who speak French, because Federer will speak in French when he's there, they love Federer. Like, they used to cheer for Federer over Nadal when Nadal was the many times champion and basically their champion and the one who accomplished the most greatness at that particular venue. In that scenario, Nadal was the bad guy if he beat Federer in the final or was seen to be winning instead of Federer. So one of the weirdest things about this is it's just about the fans and what their perception of the players are and who's the most popular at the time. When it says the role of the bad guy or talking about being a bad, it's not talking about actually being a bad guy, like a bad human being with terrible qualities. And it's not in any way, by the way, a moral judgment about Djokovic himself. But the problem is, a lot of his fans, and particularly obviously his Serbian fans, were raging about this, like, oh my goodness. And the problem I have is this. In general, I quite like Serbians. I know a few of them in esports. They can be pretty cool people. They are somewhat salt of the earth at times. They're very straightforward. There's not a lot of subterfuge. But you're taking this too literally. And I have noticed within those people, there does seem to be some sort of a self-victimisation streak. Look, I get it. If you look at some of the things that have happened in the country and have been treated by the international community, and some of they were obviously bombed, etc. I get all that. That is all terrible. And I even get, by the way, that in the case of Djokovic, look, you have to be on the lookout, right? People are trying to malign this guy. Like, think about it, right? If you had that thing all those last few years with a certain thing that he wouldn't do or how he could travel or not, yeah, obviously he was being constantly, I would say, maligned, misrepresented, slandered. There was all sorts of outrageous stuff, and the media were front and centre for that. So yeah, don't get me wrong, the media have done all sorts of crazy stuff in that regard, and they've been incredibly unfair to Djokovic. And quite frankly, if I were him, I think he has the patience of a saint sometimes to put up with this or to come back to those people years later when they no longer say anything and now he's just winning. They're like, oh, hey, you're back to number one again. And you're the people who are basically saying like he shouldn't be allowed to attend the event or should have his ranking points taken or he should be forced to do X, Y, and Z. But the reason I bring this up is because I feel like the Djokovic fans in general, man, the natural, immediate MO is to just go to victimisation, is to just be like, everything's a slight, no one can appreciate Novak unless they like him like I like him. Like, I feel like they act as though, like, if someone just thinks Federer's better, that must mean they hate Novak Djokovic. If that's some sort of a slight to Novak, someone else thinks someone else is better or could win. So in this particular case, it was absolutely a storm in a teacup. This is making a fucking molehill into a mountain in this particular side. There was no issue at all. If you actually understood, this is a rare example of actually the guy was trying to be quite fair. What he was basically saying to Djokovic is, since they're the super fan favourite players and very, very popular, and people want them to win and be on top and be number one and have the most Grand Slams, what has it been like to be chasing them? And therefore, within the story of a Federer or a Nadal fan, you're the villain. You're the one ruining their day. You're the one stopping Federer winning Wimbledon 2019, etc., or some of the Australia Opens that Nadal was never able to win. In that scenario, it's actually just a totally reasonable, somewhat neutral question. Yeah, it has an element of like bias in terms of like he's characterising it, but that's even pretty fair. Isn't that what Novak Novak's career was like for most of that period of time, it doesn't make any sort of moral judgment about him in 2023.
Obviously, my main gig is over in esports on my main channel, but my side channel and all my content around my other interests here are kindly supported by my Patreon community on Thorin's side here. So do you want to ask me a question for my video AMA? Do you want to take part in a private one-on-one exclusive, never to be released but recorded for you session? Call it consulting, call it just a conversation if you want. Do you want to find out who upcoming guests are for the Thor Inquiry episodes? If any or other perks like this take your interest, check out the Patreon link in the description box below and join Thorin's side today.